Hello. Welcome to Making It Up. I am Carter Wilson. And if you've heard this show before, you know what I do is I talk to writers of all different backgrounds and try to get to know them a little bit better, try to kind of understand their origin story and how they got to become a writer and what their journey through the world of publishing has been like. And at the end of every episode, we pick a random sentence from a book from those bookshelves behind me, and we use it to craft a short story together, which is always fun, scary, compelling, sometimes a total shit show. So on this episode, I had the pleasure and privilege of speaking to Lynne Constantine. So I got to know Lynne a few years ago, as I have a lot of authors through conferences. So that's always a fun time. And at the time, Lynne and her sister Valerie had co-written this book together under the name Liv Constantine. And that book was The Last Mrs. Parrish. And I remember it was just coming out at Thriller Fest a few years ago. And it ended up doing great. It was a Reese Witherspoon book club selection, which is a pretty big deal. And they've gotten just tremendous reviews from, the Sunday Times, USA Today, People Magazine, et cetera, et cetera. It really helped kind of launch them together under Liv Constantine. Since that time, Lynne has gone on and written other books under the name Elsie Shaw. So other thrillers, political thrillers, spy thrillers, and has found success doing that as well. So she's really interesting to talk to. We had a great conversation. Her background is varied, and she's got some interesting political background through her father, which you'll hear. And we talked a lot of just about what it's like co-writing with somebody, writing with a sister, and how does that work? I've never co-written at all. I think it would be a tremendous amount of work, and the bond you have to trust one another and to capture similar voices, I think would be tremendously difficult. So it was great to hear her insights on that. And her latest release under Elsie Shaw is The Silent Conspiracy, which is also done well and received some tremendous reviews. So really, it was an honor to talk to Lynne, and she's always been kind with me. She blurbed, I believe, Mr. Tinder's Girl, which was fantastic. And it was just a great conversation. So enjoy. This is me talking to Lynne Constantine.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Look at all those fancy book covers behind you.
That was one of my Christmas gifts to myself. Just I got the, have you seen those mixed tiles? They're everywhere on Instagram.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah,
So
that's great. How have you been?
I've been good.
Healthy?
Yeah, a little cabin fever, but other than that, fine, thankfully. How about you and yours?
Good. Where are you?
Yeah. In Connecticut, in Milford.
Okay. And you've been just kind of locked down?
Yeah. I mean, actually, things are open, although we're not really going a lot of places other than the grocery store or, a store here and there. In the summertime, when you could eat outside, we were doing more, but you can't, restaurants are open, but we're just kind of trying to err on the side of caution. So not doing a whole lot of that.
Totally. Yeah, we're the same. I mean, we're here in Colorado, and we've been pretty causous. I haven't been on a flight since almost exactly a year ago. We've gone to the mountains a few times for Airbnb vacations, but that's about it. And that's just kind of a self-contained little pod. But yeah, and it's getting old for sure. And with the end in sight, it's kind of, I don't know if that's better or that's worse, because we're definitely getting a little stir crazy. And it's my daughter's senior year in high school, so that's been kind of a bummer too.
Oh yeah, I know. My guys are in college, so it's it's been a little difficult for them. I'm just going to text my husband and tell him to keep it down out there. We're close quarters.
Yeah. We have protocols here, and the very first one when I'm starting to record is to lock the cat up, because he's a lunatic, and otherwise he would literally just be here screaming at me the entire time. So what can you do?
Yeah. Well, hopefully you can hear. Can you hear anything but me? Can you?
No, your audio's good. Your audio's good.
Okay, good. All right, good.
But I mean,
Yeah.
it's all good. It's all understandable. And especially, I've got kids who are home learning and, so everyone's in their own room, kind of on their own computers doing their own thing. But,
Yeah,
the noise
exactly.
filters through. But it's great to see you and get a chance to talk to you. I don't actually know you that well. I've gotten to know you a little bit. And you've been super kind to blurb a book of mine, which was great. But it's nice to get a chance to kind of pick your brain and get to, learn a little bit more about who you are. So just kind of, starting from the beginning, did you grow up in the Northeast?
Yeah, I grew up in Maryland. So yes, in a little place called Towson, and lived there pretty, all my life until I went to college in Boston, a teeny college called Hellenic College,
Okay.
and then went back to Maryland in my 20s and was there until we moved. I guess it's been 20 some years now to Connecticut. My husband was relocated and got a job in MasterCard. So we moved to Westport, Connecticut, and lived there for almost 10 years. And then we really wanted to be closer to the beach. And so we decided to make the move to Milford, which is where we are now in a beach community. We're like on the beach street, which is nice. So it's a
That
little
is
different.
nice.
We had more room, a little more spacious when we were in Westport, but it's nice. I mean, we know all of our neighbors, and there's a really great sense of community, which is a lot of fun.
So when you were growing up, what did your parents do?
So my father was in for a long time. He had his own advertising agency. I don't know if it was anything like Mad Men or not, but I mean, he definitely dressed the part and had
Yeah.
all the hats and the suits. And
Three
then
martini
he,
lunches.
right, right. I don't know. I think he liked scotch, but yeah, I'm
That
sure
works too.
I was right. And then he ended up, he was actually an assistant to Agnew when he was vice president. My father had
Oh,
run his campaign. They were neighbors and friends, and he lived down the street from us. So my father ran his public fundraising for governor. And then when he became vice president, my father worked for him. And then funnily enough, the commute from Baltimore to Washington got on his nerves, so he like stopped a year before all of the scandal happened. So he
wow.
wasn't caught up. Yeah, he wasn't a part of any of that, and in fact was pretty heartbroken because he was really good friends with Agnew and wasn't.
Do you have memories of, when you were a little kid, when he was, working with the administration at all? Did
I do. I mean, I remember Randy Agnew coming to our house for dinner. My brother Michael, who is 5 years older than I am, he went to one of the inaugural balls he escorted Kim Agnew, and my parents were there. I remember my mom driving to Washington once a week. She and a bunch of other ladies would meet with Judy, and they would help her with all the correspondence because they would hand write, in response, like cards and
huh.
everything. So she did that once a week. So I was 10 to 12 or whatever. Now, my sister Valerie
Yeah.
actually also worked in the administration. So she has many more memories of that.
Oh.
She actually worked I think she was in the White House in the scheduling department. So, and she
Oh.
was older. See, we're 14 years apart. So she
Oh, I didn't
was,
realize you were that far apart. Okay.
right. So
She was
she
in her
knows the
20s.
watch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she dated the, senators and the different people. So she really kind of was right
Huh.
there. I was too young to have all the
Wow.
fun.
And so, but you obviously, or maybe you did, were you interested in political science, and kind of going that route at all?
No, not really. I mean, I was interested in law, and for a long time, I really thought I wanted to go into criminal law. I wanted to be a prosecutor. And then the paranoid part of my brain, which all of this feeds into the writing, I think, was like, I don't know if I want to put people in jail and have them, come after me. So then I sort of shifted gears and I thought I wanted to be a psychologist.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, that's my undergrad is in human development. And then when I went to graduate school, I was working and going to graduate school at night. And I started taking some courses in counseling. And I was like, I don't think I can sit in an office all day and listen to people's problems. And I'm such a problem solver. I wouldn't
That's
be a
the
good
rub.
fit.
But so all the ingredients are there, with the exception of like, how the hell do I write? Because that's what happened for me.
Right.
It's like, I think I've always had that brewing as well, but I come from a business background, and my writing just kind of started on a whim. but I didn't know what I was doing. So what was that first, I'm going to start writing a story. I'm going to start writing a novel. What was that inception?
Well, I mean, I always enjoyed writing in English. I always did well. And it's funny, when I was in graduate school, I remember I had written a paper about management by wandering around. And
Hmm.
the director of the program had approached me and said, I really think you should try to get this published. At the time, I thought, "Ugh, who cares about being like, I don't have the patience to try to submit this. And what's the big deal? Looking back, I was so naive. It was the same thing like in college. I was asked to be the TA, and I was like, nah, I'd rather make my money waitressing. Like I just had no clue about how important these kinds of things were. Anyway, so I enjoyed writing and was okay at it, I guess. And then my sister and I wrote a book called Circle Dance years and years ago. We were always huge readers. And
Yeah.
from really, my mother fostered the love of reading, and my father, he was mostly self-taught, really. I mean, my father, I used to be able to come home with my spelling words or my vocabulary words, and I would ask him and he'd give me the definition. I didn't have to look it up, in the dictionary. And that was all from his reading. And so we would go to the library every week, my mother, my aunt, and my sister and I, and we would all get the same book and we would talk about it. And at the time, it was a lot of like Pearl Buck and Susan Howitch, all of
Hmm.
these family saga type books. And again, when I was working, and I guess I was in my late 20s at that point, I said to Valerie, there really aren't any books about Greek American families. And none of us married, none of my siblings married Greeks. And my grandmother was really our only connection to the old country, and, with her recipes and her Greek accent and all of that. And she had passed. And I just thought one day when I have children, they're really not going to know what it's like. So that was born out of a labor of love to sort of memorialize what it was like being Greek American and kind of bringing that culture in, growing up, American, but with all of the Greek traditions. So I bought a book that said how to write and sell your first novel,
Hmm.
because of course that's what you do, right? You get a book on whatever you need. And
You still have that book, I assume.
yeah, I don't. I wish I did. In fact, we got our first agent who was the ex-wife of the author of that book. It was very, yeah, it was very strange. So,
Yep.
it was just kind of very much an ABC. And so we outlined and, we've just followed it very carefully. And we wrote this book, Circle Dance, and finished it, our first draft, and went and started sending it out to everybody. Didn't know you needed to go through a bunch of revisions. We were going to be on Oprah. It was going to be this big thing. So that's how we got our start. And obviously it wasn't picked for an Oprah pick, but it's still out there somewhere.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere, and it's interesting. So yeah, the same thing. Like I had zero idea about I was 33, and I had zero idea about the publishing industry, and I had just written this book, which I knew wasn't good, but I did it, and it was weird that I did that. So I'm like, well, now what? And that's what you do. You just start. You go online or you get a book, and like, this is how the publishing industry. This is how you find an agent.
Right. Did you show it to all your friends and have them read it and see?
No, I was exactly the opposite. I didn't tell anybody I was writing. I was ashamed of it. I was embarrassed by it. I didn't want to be the guy who said, a year later, they're like, whatever happened to that book? And I didn't finish it or whatever. I mean, my wife at the time, I didn't even tell her about it.
Wow.
It was such a weird moment for me. And it was like 3 months. I wrote this 400-page manuscript and it never sold, but I got an agent with it.
Well, that's amazing though, that you got an agent with it.
Yeah, 75 rejections, and then I landed her, and I'm actually still with her 19 years later, 18 years later. But what amazes me is how many people will ask me, and I see if it's the same for you. Do you get people asking you like, well, how do you do this? I want to write a book. I want to get an agent. Tell me everything how to do. I'm like, well, go on. There's so much information out there. I'm not going to spend 2 days telling you how to do all this. I don't know if you get a lot of people asking, advice like that.
Right. And I'm sure you have, like, you've written blog, you've talked about it, written blogs, and sometimes I'll just send somebody something and be like,
yeah,
it's kind of all here, but yeah, I mean, I get a lot of just, where do you get the ideas, or how do you think of that? Which I think probably you get the same thing, or don't. I'm sure you get, because I know I love your books and I love your writing. I'm sure you get, are you?
What's wrong with
you?
you?
Your wife maybe close to her eyes at night, like being next to you, right? Are you?
So you had always had that kind of relationship with her where that was an easy thing to do in a way.
We were, so, for the first 12 years of my life, not, wasn't, she was married and gone early. And,
Right.
and I'm actually closer in age to her sons than I am to
Sure.
her. And
Yeah.
we're also very, very close. And when I was about 13, I started spending summers with her and her husband and kids. They lived on the Eastern Shore. I mean, not far, like an hour from our house, but still I would go and spend time. And that's when we really became close. It was like, I think for her at 13, I was sort of more of a person at that point. And I think I was mature for a 13-year-old. And I remember, of course, at the time she smoked and I was sneaking cigarettes. I think we bonded over like smoking together, and I could go down there and I could smoke and I could, do my thing. And we just became best friends from that point and grew closer and closer. And so we were always, in many ways, whatever we were going through, like we lost my father when I was only 16,
Hmm.
very young. We were each other's sort of salvation through a lot of things that we went through in life, and have always been for each other that person who, with absolutely no judgment, you can tell anything to. And so we get, even though she's the older sister, it's really it's always been very equal from that point where, we've just supported each other emotionally. We have very similar senses of humor. I mean, we have
Hmm.
obviously areas where we're very different in our points of view, but I think we just complement each other and we have a great time together. So, and for so many years we were having to live apart. And so the time where we were writing was really the only time in our entire lives. And that was maybe a 4 or 5 year period where we were both physically in the same place. We were both,
Yeah.
she was divorced at the time. I wasn't married yet. We were both living in apartments close to each other, like a mile apart. That had never happened before. And so we were together all the time and it was wonderful. And then 5 years later, of course, after we wrote Circle Dance, like a year later, we moved to Connecticut. And so
Hmm.
again, so now we're again at a point where she's in Maryland, I'm here, and we keep saying maybe we can end up in Florida together or something. We would love to be back together. So it's been a wonderful thing because it's also given us more time other than just family visits, especially, well, this year was an exception, of course. We were supposed to be together every month. I haven't seen her since February either, except for on screen. But with book tours and stuff, it's been so great because then we get to go off for a week or two and be together
Right.
and do all of this. So it's been a blessing in so many ways.
Well, I'm always so impressed and fascinated by the collaborative writing process because I don't do that at all. I've co-written some short fiction, and that's it. Do you think you could do that with somebody else, or only because of the relationship with your sister that you're able to do that?
It's a good question. I think I could. I think I could. I mean, I think it would probably be very different because and it would take some getting used to, depending on who the person was. She and I have developed such a synergy that so often we'll just say the same thing at the same time, or, and not to say that there's not ever hiccups. I mean, there are, especially in the developmental stages, that's the time where there's the most sort of potential for differences of opinion, where I'm thinking it should go one way and she's thinking it should go another. But once we hit our stride in a story, it really becomes pretty seamless. I mean, but I would definitely consider trying that with somebody else, but I with some trepidation. I don't, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's healthy, I think, because the publishing industry is a collaborative process, right? So if you're a solo writer, that just doesn't mean that your job is done once you write the book. There's collaboration you have to be able to take edits, um
Yep.
and be a team player, and also push back. So I guess you're almost training for that because you still go through all of that as well. Have you established, how have things changed over the books in terms of, like, okay, now we're in a groove where we used to have differences of opinion, we now see where this is a strength of ours? Is there, do you see a big difference between your earlier works together and then how you work together now?
Yes, it's definitely evolved. So when we wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish, we split it up, and Valerie wrote the majority of Amber, and I wrote the majority of Daphne, although we did, I did write some of those earlier scenes. And then when we wrote the next book, we realized, no, we really need to split it into scenes rather than characters, because of course, every character, even if you're writing just from a point of view, those other characters are in that point of view. And so it just felt like we really needed to do it that way. And now we're at a point where it's not only just scenes, but it often is half of a scene. So I might write half of it, like we'll talk about every day. We don't strictly outline. So we kind of know, we know what the twist is usually. We don't always know the ending. We know sort of where we're going in the beginning. And we talk every day and say, okay, I'm going to work on this, you work on that, with the freedom to go in different directions. But a lot of times I'll write half of it and then I'll just either be stuck or I'll be kind of bored and I'll say, do you want to finish this? And I'll send it to her and she will. And vice
Yeah.
versa. So that's always, that's like the best part.
Amazing. Because that's the worst part of writing. It's just,
isn't it?
oh,
Yeah.
I hate this scene. I just want to get over it. It becomes like data entry work.
It does. Yeah.
So
and
to have somebody be like, take the torch from you and finish that off, and vice versa. That's got to be amazing.
It's really nice. Yeah.
And I think that has to be that's, to me, that's mind blowing. The idea that you guys are writing, within the same scene, because I can see where you're having two different voices where that's tremendously helpful because, I think one of the things I struggle with, I usually don't have more than one voice or POV in my books, but when I do, it's very easy to have them sound similar if you're not careful. Right. So to have two people doing voices would be great, but you have to you have to know each other so well and your style and where you're going to go with your thought process to just trust somebody to, okay, that scene's done. And maybe it's even better than what I was envisioning once you passed it off to her.
It usually is. And we always send everything with a caveat, like, feel free to edit, feel free to change, or if she sends me something or I send her something, she'll say, here's my edits, but you don't, feel free to change whatever so we don't feel attached to anything. Other than putting out the best book that we can. And so that, that's.
How does that differ then with your solo work, which is terrific also? So, and it's different, right? It's a different, a totally different type of thriller. Is that an outlet for you to be able to like, okay, now I get to be completely in control and I get to exercise these muscles and I get to tell a story that we wouldn't have told together?
Yeah, and in large part, yes. The Elsie Shaw books, they're much more, I guess, traditional thriller, conspiracy thriller. There are a lot more moving parts. There are a lot more characters.
A lot more research too.
A lot more research. A much bigger stage. Going into it, that is the feeling like, oh yes, this is all me. I get to do anything I want. And then it's also like, oh yeah, this is all me. I can't hand this off to anybody else. So it's a double-edged sword. I mean, I think if I had to, because we get asked a lot, like I get asked a lot, which is better. I mean, I think the collaborative and working with Valerie, I prefer, because there just are so many positives and so few negatives. I mean, the only really negative is if there is a disagreement, which we do resolve, or scheduling, like if,
sure.
But on the other hand, I think it's good and important for me to be able to know that I can do that on my own, and that it doesn't be not a crutch, but that I'm capable of producing solo work. And so, and I don't think that it's something that Valerie wouldn't write. I mean, it's not that that's not her interest, but I think I'm more interested in that genre. And she's got another project on the side because we're busy with our own stuff, which is more traditional women's fiction, which is, something that she might and hopefully will end up finishing as well.
So would you say your Elsie Shaw works are, because I'm hearing a little bit about you kind of want to prove to yourself that you can do it, but is there true passion there as well? Or is it just like, I want to be able to say I can do this? Because it's interesting. You have two different types of thrillers. One that's very personal, where the stakes are a person or a family, and it's much kind of more haunting and visceral. And then you have, like you said, more traditional, where the stakes are huge on a world stage. Is there a passion to tell that bigger story that's driving you, or is it more that I just want to make sure I can do this on my own just in case?
No, it's definitely a passion. And in fact, the network was written before Valerie and I started.
Okay.
Before we started writing the Liv books, it was originally, I had self-published it, and it was called the Veritas Deception. And I published it right before we got an agent, because I had all this work and I had worked with a professional editor for it. And it was a book that took like 10 years that I had had a real passion for, that a story that I really wanted to tell about. And it's very ironic because you would think that I just wrote it now considering our current world, but the whole thrust of the network, of course, is that there are these unseen forces behind everything, behind the media, behind the news, behind the entertainment world, that are pushing an agenda, and people are being manipulated by that, and
Yep.
and then of course it's told personally through to Jack and Taylor, characters I really like, who are these journalists who have their own personal things going on through the larger story. So if that was a story, I mean, it's really a book. It's very, very close to my heart. I love that book. HarperCollins was, very gracious, republished it in 2 years ago as The Network. And then that story wasn't finished. And so The Silent Conspiracy was the continuation of that, which again, I want to write one more. I don't know when. I mean, it's not yet in the works, and I have to see. But as you know, like, it's a numbers game, and you have to see how well things do. And so, but who knows? I mean, if it doesn't get picked up, I might write it just to write it anyway. I don't know.
When you went to write that second book, was it a feeling of kind of being back in that world again, and there was a sense of comfort in those characters, or was it difficult to kind of change your mindset and get back into it?
It was both. I mean, on the one hand, it was like coming back to old friends, because I love Jack and Taylor, and I really feel like I know them so well. So in that sense of going, because it's the first series, if it ends up, which I would like it to continue, that's the first experience I had with doing that. So, so much time goes into developing those characters and their backstory. So it was great to not have to do that. But then it was like, okay, well, what are they going to do? And I couldn't. First book, they're very much on the run. Their lives are in peril. I couldn't do the same thing,
Right.
but it had to be action packed. And so it was much harder. And I had a tighter time frame as well, because of course I was juggling doing 2 books in a year, for a publisher, with dates, with deadlines. And so what I had to do with that book, because there were times I just sit here and think, okay, well, what am I going to write today? And I actually made myself a spreadsheet. I had to write, I think it was like 3,500 words a day to get this done.
That's a lot.
A lot.
That's a lot.
Right. Especially when you don't know, it's one thing if I were an outliner and I knew exactly but I didn't.
Right. They have to be good words too. They can't just be 3,500 word words.
Well, I was like, they could just be whatever, because I knew it was a first draft. So I did say, it can be, I don't care, what you write, but you have to sit here and write. And I would keep track. And that's exactly how I plodded along, because I had to write it, I think, in like 6 weeks or something. And then through a revision, and I just kept worrying it wouldn't be as good as The Network. And because again, I loved that book, and that book had so much that I wanted to say that I had to cut back. In this book, I was like, okay, what am I trying to say?
Right.
And I mean, but it's been great to see the reviews, and really, it's gotten better reviews than The Network has. And people are enjoying it. So, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to get back to that, but again, who knows when.
That, writing isn't really necessarily enough. It's, it's a business, and you need to network, and you need to meet other people, and you need to have, complementary ventures like the show, because all of that helps your writing career, aside from just the actual putting words on paper. So it's important to do I think it's important to do other things as well, that all kind of tie together.
Agree.
So
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, when we go to conferences, the people that we meet there, all of a sudden you have, I have connections with these people who, who could blurb my book, or I could blurb theirs, or, I could ask their advice, or maybe they know who is a good, website editor or whatever.
Yeah.
All of that makes a tremendous difference. So just on a typical day, what is I'm just curious. I'm always curious about this. Like what makes you happy when you're writing? What is there a moment in the day where you're writing or doing something writing related day, like, oh, this is why I do this. This is like my favorite part. And it doesn't happen every day, but I love when this happens.
Well, I love getting cover designs, anything in or getting, when you get that, the advanced readers in the mail, or your first copies of your book, or that first review, assuming it's good, which is not always, the industry reviews, right? Like, so yeah, I love all of that. Or, or even just the satisfaction. I mean, of course, I love finishing a draft and then celebrating a little bit and going back. But I think all of those milestones are really cool. Just when you're getting, from your editor or good feedback from your editor, and then or blurbs, a great
Yeah.
blurb from somebody, all of those
Yeah.
kinds of things, a nice review. Yeah.
When you finish a draft, do you really have it? I never feel, I never have that sense of like, pop the champagne. I'm like, okay, that's done. Now let me start again. And
Yeah.
it's hard to be at I think it's after I'm done with my first round of edits with the editor where I'm like, I think whatever's going to come after this isn't going to be much. So this is
Right.
effectively done. That's when I feel kind of this sense of like, all right, this is kind of what it's going to look like when it's out there. And
Yeah.
that's scary, but also a good feeling because, then I can focus on the next thing. So do you have that sense of accomplishment?
I mean, I do when we finish. I do have a sense of accomplishment when we go through ourselves 3 or 4 rounds of edits before
Yeah.
we even hand it off. And so I do feel not I know it's going to change again, and I know, we're going to hold my breath till I get that, well, not really, but to get to editor's letter. But I do feel a sense of accomplishment at that point. Like, okay, we've gotten this. This is great. But I mean, then what we usually do is 2 days later we talk about, all right, what are we writing next? So we're already sketching out. So I don't stay in the like place of just, okay, here we are, and now I don't have to do anything for long, because I like to be in the midst of it anyway. But then yes, when we get I always dread that first round of edits, because you always know it's going to be maybe it's not for you, but they're usually quite extensive. And
Oh,
they're
yeah.
if,
They're all over the place. Like,
yeah.
my editors, and that's the other thing about it being kind of a collaboration. And what's every time I get edits, whether it's just advice from my agent or actual edits from my editor, I mean, almost wholly, I'm like, you're totally right. Like, you look at that, you're like,
Oh yeah.
totally right. I can't even think of many times where I've even pushed back a little bit. And everything they are suggesting is making it better. And I've gone from anywhere from like where like Mr. Tinder's Girl, the edits were actually pretty light. And then Dead Girl and 2A, it's like, yeah, we need a subplot here. I don't know what that's going to be, but can you just do that? Like,
Oh, I
okay.
know. Yeah, we need another major twist. Just go
Right.
cook that up.
Right. Like, okay, a subplot. All right. Well, mark 2 months off of my calendar and I'll get to work on those. So mine have been kind of all over the place in terms of their extensiveness, but yeah, usually it's, you have to, and that's where you have to really check your ego, right? And feel like, and that's where my background of not having any kind of ego with writing and assuming I was terrible the whole time has been really helpful, because I can look at them like, yeah, you know what you're doing. I thank you for telling me I can go work on this. And that's what gives me the energy to attack it. I do feel at all like I hear the edits and it's, oh, now we've got to do this. And it feels like a burden.
Well, no, I mean, we always feel that they make it better, but we always joke with our editor that we don't communicate for at least 24 hours with her after we get the edits, because our first reaction is always like, "Ugh, come on." And, but then we calm down and we read it and we're like, oh yeah, I mean, she is, and she's right. And it's the same thing. We take 90, probably 98, 99%.
Yeah.
The only things, there may be little things that we're just, if we explain it further, then she's like, oh, okay, then that makes sense. And when you looking back, it's always a million times better, which
Yeah.
is, and again, having self-published for the first go round, I can see the difference between even having hired a freelance editor, because I don't know that they push you. Some of them do. I mean, we have actually a great one that we work with now who does push us all the way, but you see what a difference 1 or 2 more edits makes. I mean, and even when you think you're done, sometimes we'll get one more like late round, but it always makes it better. So, I mean, if you have a good editor, which we do. Do you listen to the audiobooks?
No, I'll listen to like maybe 2 minutes of it. And sometimes I'll listen to parts where I know that there's a really profane scene coming up and I want to hear them say those words because that makes me laugh. But no, I don't listen to it otherwise. It's so interesting to find out when people give you feedback on audiobooks and you're like, oh, we love this narrator. I'm like, oh, that's great. I haven't heard it, but it's just
Yeah.
so it's weird. You're kind of disembodied from that.
It's a weird. I have listened to not all of them, but like Mrs. Parrish, I listened to, and it's that was such a different experience. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it because I knew Amber was horrible, but she's so much bitchier on audio than even on the page.
They nailed her, huh?
Yeah. You just laugh out loud because she's so sad, and her voice is so sweet sounding, and then you hear her mean thoughts and you're like, wow. So yeah,
Yeah, I
I would
struggle a
recommend.
little. I was just going to say
Yeah.
I struggle a little bit with like that's not how I pictured
And
that
oh
person.
yeah, yeah. They always sound like not how you expect.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So you just got to get over that. Yeah, and I was just going. The only other comment I was going to make on the edits is like your editor is also thinking, I think, more than just your story. They're thinking about your name, your brand,
Mhm.
and that's something that I lose focus of, because I'm like, I want to write this crazy story about this. Well, no, that's, if this is a Carter Wilson book, then it's got to at least be within some kind of expectations of your readers. And so they tend to, well, they can rein you in as well with that.
Well, it's interesting because for the Stranger in the Mirror, which comes out in July,
Yeah.
we had a scene where somebody had killed someone and turned them into like a plastic mummy.
As one does.
And she was like, yeah, I don't think this is really a Liv, like, this is
Right.
not, this is
Right.
going over into horror a little bit too more. Can you change this up? And so we were like, yeah, okay. We had done all this research on like how they would have embalmed them like that, it would look like a person. So we did change it.
I know it's funny to see sometimes what you want to try to get away with. What's coming out in May, The Dead Husband, a dog dies, a dog gets killed. But I'm like, how can I kill a dog violently, but make it okay? Because that's a really hard thing to do. So
was it a really horrible dog or something?
It was an unknown dog. So
like maybe a cyborg dog or something.
But it was just this neighbor's dog that you didn't really know about. I was waiting to hear on the edits, like, is killing the dog going to be a problem? And apparently it wasn't. So
I know. I killed a dog in the network too. I mean, it was a horrible character that killed his son's dog, which was part of the reason that the son turned out to be terrible.
Right. There's got to be meaning in it.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't really, because obviously, I mean, I'm a huge dog lover, and
yeah. Well, listen, we're gonna tell a story here.
All right.
And this is
a little nervous.
Yeah. Oh, I always get nervous before this, but that's the best part of it, is there's beauty in it being a disaster as well.
Okay.
So we're going to pick out a book kind of randomly behind me. I don't know. Lately I've been asking people to just choose a color, and then I'll choose a book that's that color.
Red.
So do you see something that's standing at, not red, because everyone's been choosing red.
That's what I just picked.
Oh, you just said red. I didn't even hear you. Okay.
I can pick something else if you want.
Something else.
Black.
Okay. I'll be right back. So this is black and red. So Mortal Fear. So tell me a page. Oh God, it's a big book. I forgot how big this was. Page between 1 and 600.
Wow. All right. 216.
Okay. And give me there's only a couple sentences on this. So give me a number between 1 and 3, and that'll be the sentence number.
3.
So I'm going to read this sentence, and then just follow it up with whatever you want, a sentence or two, and then I'll follow that up, and we'll just see where it goes. And then at some point I'll say the end. I take a huge bite of cold pizza and wash it down with Diet Coke.
The Diet Coke is warm, so I spit it out and grab the bottle of Corona instead.
Wow. It had been 2 years, 3 days since I last had a sip of alcohol. I can't believe I failed so quickly, but goddamn, does it taste good.
Why did I waste 2 years and how many days?
3 days.
3 days. Living on the wagon. Let me open the refrigerator and see if there's more in there.
I don't even remember buying all this beer. How did it come to this, that when I open my refrigerator after all this time, it's completely stocked with Coronas? It's like a beautiful golden haze of light that washes over me. I start popping them open one at a time.
I look up when I hear a noise from the bedroom, and a woman walks out wearing nothing but my shirt, my police shirt.
Looks like my promise to keep myself dry isn't the only thing that I've broken. Margie, I say, are you still here?
She looks at me with she looks at me with a strange look and says, I think your wife just pulled up. Do you want me to get dressed? Or should I offer her a beer too?
Last thing I remember, I told her, I was booking you and taking you down to the station. I'm going to have to make sure to get an STD test. But I'll let you get back to the streets.
Well, that's not going to happen because, as I told you last night, I got pictures of you doing all that coke, and I don't think your captain would like it. So before I leave, I'd like you to write me that check you promised me.
I had a decision to make. I could write the check or I could just do nothing. I swallow the rest of the beer and think how good it would feel just to do nothing for the rest of my life. And I see over on my countertop my service pistol and think about how that could cause a whole lot of nothing.
The door opens and Susie walks in. What the hell is going on here? She screams, looking over at Marjorie and then at me with the beer in my hand.
What's her name? What's the wife's name?
Susie.
I smile at my wife and I say, Susie, there's the gun there on the counter. It's yours to do what you want with. It's your choice to make.
Before Susie can answer, Marjorie grabs the gun and aims it at me. Susie looks over at her and says, go ahead, do it. She pulls the trigger, and all I hear before I feel anything, is a loud explosion.
I've been on enough crime scenes in my life where I know what it feels like even before getting shot. It went clean through my left shoulder, and it felt no more than a bee sting, but that must have been the shock in the beer. I fall to the ground. Blood pumps out onto the linoleum floor. It looks almost pretty.
Susie runs over, shoot him again, and then put the gun in his hand. Quick. Our tickets, I've got the tickets in the car. Our flight leaves at 7.
Oh, I think we have to end it there. That's perfect. Well done. I think that's your next collaborative book.
I was going to say, maybe we can collaborate on a little short story together. Right?
I haven't done any of these yet where it doesn't go super dark fast.
Well, that's where you interview. Yeah, you got to get some romance writers or something on the show.
I have a romance writer coming up, so I'm anxious to talk to her and see where that story goes. So, hey, listen, it was so awesome to talk to you. And
it was great talking to you.
Good to see your face, and hopefully we'll get to see each other at Thriller Fest or another conference or somewhere.
I hope so. Are you going to BoucherCon? I know they've got. I haven't decided whether or not I have the faith. So.
Yeah, I'm just not committing to any kind of travel at this point. I want to get vaccinated. I want the world to get a little bit better before I just start roaming around. And I kind of assume with a lot of travel, you're probably going to be able to book at the last minute without too much difficulty.
That's a good point.
But we'll see. So right now I'm not committed, but I really enjoyed our conversation. It was nice to get to know you a little bit more.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Absolutely. We'll talk again soon. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye. So that was my conversation with Lynne. She was fantastic. We had a great time talking. It was good to catch up with her, and I loved hearing her backstory. So if you want to find out more about Lynne, you can find out about her solo work under lcshawauthor.com. And if you want to know more about her books with her sister, you can just go to livconstantine.com. If you want to find out more about me or subscribe to my must-read material newsletter, you can just go to carterwilson.com. More episodes coming out soon. In the meantime, thanks.